Household budgets are getting squeezed as higher gas prices and surging inflation hits disposable incomes. Let's get into how you can manage these increased household expenses. Joining me now, Larry Sprung, Mitlin Financial founder, for this week's FA Corner, brought to you by Capital Group. And we learned this week just how much things had gone up because we got the Consumer Price Index that showed, yes, there's gasoline prices that are going up, but it's also food. Tomatoes are going crazy because of weather in Mexico and Florida. And so, how broadly should people be thinking about this as these prices shift?
Yeah, I think you have to prepare for it. It has to be implemented into your budget and understanding that things don't stay constant, right?
Sure.
And gas flows into everything. So, even if the tomatoes were ripening on time and everything was good, the trucking and the transport of it has increased. So you have to prepare for higher prices down the road, and you have to implement flexibility into your budget as a result.
I mean, how much of people's budgets are going to gasoline? How much should go to things like how should people, what are some rough rules of thumb that people should use when thinking about this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are rough rules of thumb around housing. I don't know so much around those other gasoline.
Because you got to go where you got to go.
Yeah, you definitely do. I think one of the things that's has been a positive that's cushioned the gasoline prices has been that the IRS is reporting, on average, people have gotten 11% greater returns from their tax returns. So that influx of money, I think, has kind of absorbed some of that shock. But nonetheless, you have to prepare for these events because they can happen. And the way to do that is really just implement an emergency fund. So when these things arise, you're not straining the budget. You dip into the emergency fund. And then when the prices subside, which they will eventually, you start building back that emergency fund back up.
It's like your household strategic petroleum reserve.
Right.
When this kind of thing happens. What do you think is the threshold for gasoline prices that really does tend to create more turmoil in that household budget?
Yeah, I think, I don't know where the number is. I think there's two different things to look at. There's the psychological barrier, and then there's the financial barrier. And it seems like around that $4 mark, when people start seeing the 4 handle on the gasoline prices, it really catches people's attention and they go, wow, right? And then it really flows into how does that financially impact things? And that could vary very well from household to household because some people are not necessarily hopping in the car and commuting and others are doing that quite frequently. So it could vary very widely in terms of what that impact is from one family to another.
When it comes to that emergency fund, what do you think are sort of best practices there? Do you put in a little bit every week or every month out of every paycheck? And is it a savings account? Is it sort of what form do you think it should take?
Yeah, so typically we recommend having like a high yield savings account, right? So it's flexible, you can get to it, and naming that account, right? There is empirical evidence that says by naming an account with what it's actually intended for, you are significantly more inclined to save or, put money towards that goal. So name it your emergency fund, and it should be an amount that you want to achieve in that emergency fund, and then you should be contributing to that with every paycheck until you hit that amount. And then you could start peeling off, and then if you have to dip into it because of higher gas prices, when that starts alleviating, then you start putting money back in and build it back up to that number, whatever that number is for you.
I was sort of zoom out a little bit. After we got the CPI number this week, I was looking up the difference in that headline number of consumer inflation between January 2020 and today, and it's 29%, right? We're down from the peak heat of 2022, but still creeping up again. So not just like putting cash aside, but are you also talking with some of your clients about inflation hedges of various kinds when you see these kinds of numbers start to heat up again?
I think the biggest thing that has been the biggest inflation hedge out there and why it hasn't been, I think, a bigger story than it has, our wages have been keeping up significantly.
Until this week.
Until this week.
Until last month, I guess we could say, because that's when Because that's what we learned in the CPI report too, is that wage gains are now below that of the pace of inflation.
So the question is that a one-time event, or is that going to start telling a different narrative? Up until that, though, wages have been really keeping pace or outpacing that of inflation, so it hasn't been as much of a story. But I think at the end of the day, we're always going to see these inflationary pressures. And, I think we've had some interesting geopolitical events that have really pushed them higher. Yes. And, the question is, like we just said, is this something that's just happening today and is going to be a non-event in 3 to 6 months from now? Or is this starting a new narrative that we really have to pay attention to?
Either way, it seems like it's good to put stuff in the rainy day fund.
Always good. And the rainy day fund is truly a rainy day fund, not the vacation fund. It's really the emergency.
That is a very good caveat. Larry, thank you so much.
You.
It's good to see you.